Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure today to make public my report, Major Capital Projects Building Schools, which I recently submitted to the Legislative Assembly. I have with me today Martin Rubin, the audit principal responsible for the OAG's performance audit practice and this audit in particular. I will start by making some opening comments, which will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions about the report. Back in July 2012, I issued a report entitled Management of Major Capital Projects, which focused on the government's overall management of major capital projects and examined two major capital projects, the construction of the Government Administration Building and the construction of high schools. In that report, we only examined the high schools project up to the completion of the tendering and the awarding of the contract to the original prime contractor due to the legal actions surrounding the construction of the schools that were ongoing when the audit was being conducted at the time. The report I'm making public today follows on from my 2012 report on the management of major capital projects. It examines two major schools projects, the construction of the high schools from 2009 to 13 and the construction of the primary school buildings from 2010 to 2013, with the objective of determining whether value for money was obtained from these significant public investments. The government has invested millions of dollars to construct the high schools and primary schools. This, in conjunction with the significant deficiencies identified in my 2012 report within the Ministry of Education around project management practices and expertise in managing major capital projects, and the fact that we were not able to consider the construction phase of the high schools projects in our 2012 audit, indicated clearly that it was important that we conducted further work on these major capital projects to provide useful information to legislators, and the public about what happened and provide lessons learned for future major infrastructure projects. Looking at the key findings from the report, it is clear that government needs to do a lot more to ensure that it has the appropriate skills, expertise, and systems in place so that it can manage its major capital projects effectively, economically, and efficiently to deliver the infrastructure that is required. The building of schools was managed by the Ministry of Education, which did not have the people, systems, and practices in place to carry out this kind of work. The ministry is organized and designed to deliver education to children, not build infrastructure. Reflecting specifically on this construction of the schools, it is clear that government has spent far more than it should have and got far less than it wanted when it originally decided to build the new schools and additional classrooms at the primary schools. The establishment of the Major Capital Projects Office, along with the recruitment of a Director of Procurement, are welcome steps that have been recently taken by government. I look forward to seeing government build on these developments to ensure that the current and future major capital projects are well managed. Other key findings in the report highlights include the former Minister of Education from 2009 to 13 was very involved in the management of the projects, including inappropriate direction around procurement. We found this involvement to be outside the laws in place for the management of public funds and obscured accountability for the cost overruns, which conservatively estimated at being greater than 25 million on the projects we reviewed. The Ministry of Education lacked formal record keeping of the project and were unable to provide my audit team with credible documentation to support various decisions made during the course of the projects. The audit was delayed significantly by lack of cooperation during the course of the audit. This increased the time it took to carry out the work and complete the report, as well as significantly increasing the cost of the audit. We also found that the current arrangements do not ensure that Legislative Assembly receives adequate information to support requests for appropriations or supplementary appropriations related to the funding of ministries' capital projects. Finally, there is no clear accountability from ministries for their use of funds approved for major capital projects, especially those undertaken over a number of years. In conclusion, the Ministry of Education failed to establish the management frameworks to ensure that it managed the construction of schools efficiently and effectively to enable the achievement of value for money from this investment of significant public resources. The ministry has delivered less than it promised at far higher cost than planned, and what has been delivered has been late. The people of the Cayman Islands and the students who need proper buildings in which to learn are still waiting for the high school infrastructure that the government promised in 2005. There are important lessons to be learned from the Ministry of Education's experience of constructing schools. As the government considers new major capital projects, including the completion of the John Gray High School, it should review this report so that lessons learned can be implemented in future projects. The government still needs to implement the recommendations made in my 2012 report on major capital projects, and as such, this report provides greater insight into how government funds can be improperly spent when proper management practices are lacking. We have therefore only included 2 recommendations in this report, one relating to the need for greater transparency and accountability for major capital projects, and the second, to mitigate continuing wasteful expenditure by assessing the John Gray High School site and developing a strategy for its development going forward. I am hopeful that the development of the Major Capital Projects Office will have a positive impact on the development and implementation of current and future major infrastructure projects. And whilst it is too early to provide any assessment of this, there are clear indications that government is seeking to manage projects more effectively. In the coming years, I look forward to reporting that progress is being made to address the concerns raised by my report. Thank you for your attention, and I will now take any questions you have on this report.
One quick question. You mentioned specifically the former Minister for Education. The word was contravened Cayman Islands law. So will this report be forwarded to the police service for investigation?
We're talking about contravention of the public management and finance law, and it's unclear what if any penalties are involved in that. From my perspective, the biggest question is about having a frank and full discussion about the role of ministers and civil servants and where the boundary starts and stops, and where the involvement is. I think it's clear from what we found is that the minister was involved. I think it's important to highlight that we didn't find any specific actual evidence of any fraudulent or corruption behaviour. What we found out was breaches of the law and overstepping the line in terms of whether the law steps. And it's still unclear whether there's any real penalties under the PMFL for breaching those governance arrangements. We will, or I always do provide a briefing to the Anti-Corruption Commission, for example, about the findings from my reports in general terms, and they consider if there's anything they want to take forward. But from my perspective, we found no actual evidence of any corruption in this report. What I will say is that the lack of processes and the issues that we report increase the risk of it.
Can I just clarify where you say you're talking about a lack of cooperation from the ministry? You didn't get the information that you needed. When was that happening? I mean, was that when the minister was still in office at the time, or is it since then? So it's the new government that blocked the...
We're talking about the administration here, not the political government. Let's be clear. This was during 2014 when we conducted the audit. We had initially planned to report this audit in sometime around September or October 2014, but here we are in July 2015, reporting on it. That's indicative of how the challenge that we faced in terms of doing this audit.
Are you putting the, if I want to use the word blame, squarely then on the chief officer and the others involved in the Ministry of Education?
In terms of how we approach the audit, we deal with the administrators, and that's the officials in the ministry. And the challenge has been extracting the relevant information from the officials.
And you're saying 2014, so it would have been who was there at that point in time?
We started this audit in January 2014?
Approximately January 2014.
And it's been ongoing since then, so it's across that time frame.
And the last time you tried to get information from the ministry was when, for this report?
Probably May, I think, probably this year.
Of this year?
Yeah. Specific, but no, that was specific queries about specific aspects of the report. So we're not talking about the full range of information, but we had significant issues which were raised up the ranks in government back in April last year.
Just to be specific, when you say the former Minister of Education contravened the public management and finance law, there were two ministers, one that started the schools and the other that finished the schools. Can you tell us which minister in particular we're referring to?
We're talking about the time frame from around 2010 onwards. So I think that's
Thank you
clear.
very much.
I'll come back with my dollar value question again. Sorry, Charles, do you want to? Okay. Can we put a figure on the amount of money that's been mismanaged here?
And the reality is, and I think we've provided a table at the back of the report, gives an indication of it. I think it's in
On page 32 of the
yeah,
report.
Exhibit 3, from page 30 to page 32. We've estimated it just being over 25 million is the lack of value.
Sometimes it's more impactful for us to hear and see you
Yeah,
see it.
yeah. I know, 25 million, and we think that's probably conservative. But it's, it's with all these things, it's very difficult to estimate it, and that's just our basic estimate, and we think it could be more.
And that's waste through mismanagement rather than anybody back. Sorry, that's waste. You're suggesting it's waste through inappropriate management as opposed to somebody pilfering.
Well, that's the mismanagement, yes.
In other words,
But that, I can't speculate on any of the anything else in terms of that. We haven't got any direct evidence of anything else. So, but mismanagement enables the waste, and enables if lack of controls in place, enables other aspects to become in place, like fraud and waste, other ways of wasting money. The risks are increased significantly by what we found in terms of how the project was managed of those issues of fraud and corruption taking place. But overall, we are saying that it was mismanagement of led to a loss of 25 million.
That's a good question. And throughout our report, we give examples of where we expected management to be carried out in a particular way according to the PMFL and its regulations and the procurement practices and whatnot. And what we found was those practices were outside what we expected. In particular, on the primary schools project, we found many of those contracts to be awarded outside the framework. So the question would be then, did it get proper scrutiny? Did those contracts get proper scrutiny? Were they proper? Were they awarded in the proper amount? And then the question were they managed effectively after that? And then finally, was it assessed at the end as to whether or not value was provided? That none of that was. We didn't see any evidence of that at the end, and we talk about that extensively in our report.
So the Clifton Hunter School is finished. John Gray High School, is work still halted
Actually,
there?
it's interesting that you asked that question because Clifton Hunter is not finished yet. According to what we were expecting to find was a final inspection certificate for occupancy, and in fact, just a few weeks ago, I was out at the school just doing some following up on one minor point on our draft report, and finding out that there's still work being conducted to finish off some of the safety and construction concerns that were raised during the course of the inspection. So we talk about the fact that the school was occupied, I believe in September 2012. The special occupancy permit that is supposed to be provided was over a month later, I believe, and then the actual and since then it's been they've been working on completing the work in terms of getting that school finished, if you wish. So the term completion, we need to make sure we understand what that means. But I just wanted to bring that point up that they're still working on certain elements of the safety and security concerns that were raised during the course of the inspections.
At the Clifton Hunter High School in Frank Sound. John Gray, that's still
that's just
halted.
at the moment I'd say it's mothballed at this moment in time. No activity has been taken on that since 2012.
Correct.
It's just they made the 4 buildings that they got to completed. That's a relative term again. They made them weatherproof basically, and that's it. So there's significant amount of time of work that's still required to bring that up to anywhere that was planned.
Well, up to last year, we were still talking about mortar and bricks there. That's still some of the structures not even finished yet.
There's significant issues about John Gray, and that's why we recommend that they need to have a comprehensive risk review and risk assessment of that project to assess what needs to bring it up to what they're looking for, what needs do they actually have, and can they address that effectively? Because there's going to be significant expenditure going to be required to actually bring that up to a condition that can be used and operated for as a school.
One of the concerns when you do mothball a project like that is, for example, on the what we call the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing areas, there's a lot of material in those schools that were installed, but probably out of warranty now when they start up, when they start using them. There's a lot of concerns, and that needs to be assessed by government
Yeah.
to see how much, what they do have in terms of a viable project going forward.
Is there a safety issue at John Gray in particular?
Not at this
Not at
time
the
because
time.
there's no one there.
Nobody
Well,
there.
on that
nobody,
side.
Nobody there, yeah.
And
Nobody-
Clifton Hunter?
Well, I think that probably most of it's been mitigated by now. But obviously they occupied it in September 2012 before all the issues around the building permits had been sorted, and there was still training to be had on fire suppression systems, things like that. So there were risks. I think there were some significant risks there when they occupied it. Are any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Well, thank you very much for attending again today. I appreciate it.